Hi and good morning. So for this assignment, we are going to have this video to kind of help us go through it step by step, so it, makes it pretty super clear. There's a lot of misconceptions when we were talking about economic systems. If you are taking a social studies test from seriously August freshman year until senior in May, most of the time, if you get a question wrong on a social studies test, it's going to be economics. This is just a concept that young students are just struggle with in general. So I encourage you to really pay attention, and let's make sure that we kind of clear off some of those misconceptions so that you are ready for the test, ready for next year, ready for the rest of your life. Okay. So to do this assignment, you have so I'm going to delete them. You have an economic presentation that you are going to click on. It does this. You could use your mouse to kind of like go through it. I don't like that option. I'm just going to make it bigger. And here we have it big. So the first question on our notes, this is the portion that you are going to submit. It's asking you, what are the three economic questions? So as you are going to read and pay attention. What is economics? So up until this time, I've told you that this is how people's needs are being met. Okay. There is a study of goods and services, how they are produced, and how they are made available to people. So time, talent, raw materials, land, all of that together is going to be how you are getting crops to eat. Excuse me, if you are a farmer, all of that together is going to be how you are building a shelter, or if you have shelter accessibility. Okay, so all of these things together are really going to kind of influence your lifestyle and what's available to you, and maybe if the government doesn't let you have some of these stuff. So government versus economics. So the government rules the country. Okay, so if you wanted to talk about the person who is ruling, or if you wanted to talk about laws that are ruling that country, that's going to be government. Okay, that's going to be political. Economics is going to deal with how citizens of a country uses those resources to satisfy their wants and needs. So I need Wi-Fi so that I could do my job. So that is going to be one thing that, the government is going to kind of either it's going to step in and help, or it's going to step back and let companies handle it. So depending on what kind of government you are in, that's going to kind of influence how am I getting my Wi-Fi. Okay, so kind of keep that in mind, and let's look at our three economic questions. Our big economic questions are going to be, what is being produced? So people in different places want and need different things. Living here in Houston, I'm going to probably need a lot of shorts. I'm probably going to need, it rains a lot, so I might need rain boots. But I am probably never going to need a big, huge parka jacket, Eskimo jacket, because I am never, it's never cold here in Houston. So unless I travel to Alaska, I'm not going to need that. So what is being produced is going to make a big difference on, based on the environment that the people are living in and what those people want. Next question, how should goods and services be produced? Should the government be in charge of it? Is it the government responsibility? Or should the government step back and let companies handle it? Okay, so again, big questions. Who gets the goods and services? So, keeping with that theme of getting a jacket, this question is asking, who's making the jacket? How's the jacket being made? Is it a company, or is it the government's responsibility to make the jacket? This one is just kind of talking about who gets it. Is it going to be just the adults of a family get the jacket because they have to go to work? Or is it going to be only the kids because, kids are important too? So asking that question really makes differentiating, that leads to a whole lot of different consequences. Let's use these three. As my daughter's phone broke over the weekend, actually last weekend. So her phone broke, and now she wants an Apple phone. My husband doesn't like Apple, but she wants an Apple phone. So what is being produced? Well, Apple has an iPhone, It's iPhone 12. It's about to come out. It has all of the features that my daughter wants on a phone. How is it being made? Well, a government doesn't make it. Apple, the company, makes it, and they're going to make it so that they could make a profit, make some money. Who's going to get it? Well, the new iPhone that's coming out is what, $1,200? I can tell you that my daughter, who is y'all's age, freshman in high school, I am not paying for a $1,200 phone for her. So she is not going to get it, okay? Not a lot of people are going to be able to afford that because that's a lot of money. It's a lot of money for me. So now that kind of differentiates, oh, well, who's getting the new iPhone and who isn't. I also heard that the new iPhone doesn't come with a charger. Don't mean to throw shade. I'm sorry. It's just, all right. So like all of these questions are kind of focusing on what's being made, how is it going to be made, and who's going to get it. So with that in mind, you are going to fill out the box on your things. You have different forms of economies. You have a traditional, you have a free market, you have a communist, and you have a socialist. All of these are going to be just different ways that the people's needs are going to be met. If you are in a traditional economic system, then people live that way like their ancestors did thousands of years ago. So in traditional economic systems, you are not going to see modern jobs. A modern job today would be something that like you need modern technology to complete. So sending a man to the moon, that's not a job we had 1,000 years ago. Like people weren't sending people to the moon. So if you are talking about a traditional economic system, you're not going to see rocket scientists. You are not going to see engineers. You are not going to see a lot of the jobs that we have today that has to deal with computers because computers weren't around 1,000 years ago. So with that in mind, you have images. These are traditional jobs. So none of these people, if they stay in their community, are going to be they're not going to be the next astronaut unless they leave their community and go to a community that has computers. Let's look at the next one, Eskimos. This Eskimo is not going to be the next astronaut because he doesn't have the technology to, 1,000 years ago, we didn't have the technology to send someone to the moon. So having those traditional jobs is going to prevent that from happening. Okay, look at the Amish. They don't have any computers. So when you're looking at them, they're not going to be sending people to the moon. Therefore, they're not going to have engineers. They might have like a mathematician. They're just not going to have someone, a rocket scientist, because that job didn't exist 1,000 years ago. Okay. And here's another image with a bug and bully. 1,000 years ago, they didn't have cars. So a lot of these people are choosing to have horse-drawn buggies. They have a lot of, other jobs and other ways to move stuff. So lots of wagons. They're going to be using horses. They're going to be using donkeys. They're going to be using animals to help move things. Okay. On your next thing, so you should have said, how are they answering the questions? And you're going to find that here. People live the way they did 1,000 years ago. The 3 economic questions are being answered by tradition or value. So you're going to put that right here, tradition or value, 1,000 years ago. You're going to give some examples. So that's what all of those images are. You could talk about an African tribe. You could talk about Eskimos. You could talk about the Amish. Okay. And then advantages, there is a whole thing of advantages. So they have simple kind of lifestyles, especially with like the hunters and gatherers. There's this argument that says that they're not sitting at a job for 8 hours a day like we are. So they are actually more fluent because they have a lot more free time. Because the cows are good. They're just there, and so they don't necessarily have to watch them for 8 hours, but you and me have to come to school for 8 hours. So, there's that argument that they have a better lifestyle than we do. Everyone has a role in society. Everyone shares. Low instance of mental health problems, which is pretty cool. Really awesome. So all of these advantages, you could choose one or two, and you're going to stick it here. Then we go back to the PowerPoint, and then, oh, look, we have our disadvantages. So there's no chance for advancement in society, like the job that your parents have. That's going to be the job that you have. There's no technology. We could look at, it's weird to say that, now cars have computers. And my dad pressed a button on his car, and it started talking, like a voice came on and said, "I am trying to print that for you." And it's like, oh, what? And it was an old car too. The car is like 10 years old. So I don't know what was going on there. But like, none of these groups of people are going to have computers. They're not going to have, they might not even have modern medicine. And then they are dependent on climate and hunting. If there was a fungus that comes and kills all of the crops, then, they don't have too many choices left. And so that would be a great disadvantage. So here we have all of the things. This is those disadvantages. You're going to write them in this box. So you're going to do this with all of them. They are all broken up. As you are going into the next one, there it tells you what's in charge of it. That's extra. It gives you some examples, and then it tells you some of the advantages and some of the disadvantages. And it moves on to communists, and then we have socialists towards the bottom. Okay, so you're just going to go ahead and go through it. It does look like a lot. There are 40 slides, but really you're just looking for, advantages, disadvantages, and you're just kind of picking out all of your information that you need. This next portion, okay, you should pause and fill out this chart, okay? Pause. Now, okay, this next section, it gets kind of complicated. So let's start. You have those 3 important questions, which are here. So we actually don't need this anymore. Let me delete that. No, I'm not going to delete that. I want you to write those questions one more time. You can copy and paste your answers from this one, put them here, okay? Because these are the 3 important questions that we are going to use and kind of focus all of our thoughts on for this. Okay, we are going to start with economics. So we're going to be looking at the bottom portion. We have most rights, medium rights, and less rights. So we have the spectrum, and we have people who are going to have a lot of rights, and then we're going to have people with very little rights. I'm going to actually change this to choices. Okay. So when you open this, it should already say choices, because I don't want to influence how you're thinking or saying stuff, although as Americans, we're going, these are going to be considered our rights. So if you were here in class, we would have all looked around and I would have asked you the question. I would have said, is anybody wearing the same shirt today? Which is kind of ironic because today on campus, it's HOCO dress up week, and today is twin day. But in first period, no one was wearing the same thing. So that tells us that we have choices in what we are wearing. So we have choices. So I need you to write down the country. We are the U.S. And then we have choices. We have choices in what we buy. Okay. Then that's like a really big thing. Sorry. What you need to be asking is who is making those decisions? In the U.S., I made the decision of what I'm going to buy, and I decided to buy this little shirt. I have a red shirt on. It was my choice. Actually, my mom bought me the red shirt. So the people answer the 3 questions. Okay, the people answer those 3 questions. If you wanted to go the complete opposite, then we're going to move our thing over here, and it's going to be if the people aren't choosing, then who is choosing? Well, the government's going to choose. So one example of that is going to be China. Another would be North Korea. Okay, so here in those countries, they are going to, like, what they're wearing, what stuff they're able to buy is decided by the government. Okay, while the government isn't going to give them, like, it's not going to say, okay, Marie, today's Monday, you have to wear blue. No, the government's just going to give you all blue clothing, and you're just wearing that blue clothing for the rest of your life. Okay, they have very little choice because the government is the one who's making is answering those 3 questions. So the government is answering 3 questions. Okay, so the government's the one asking. Now we're going to come with a compromise. So we have 2 extremes. The people are choosing, the government's choosing. Now we're going to kind of meet in the middle. So what does that mean? That means that the people and the government are answering the 3 questions. Okay. One example of that is the UK. Okay. The UK is a country that is going to decide for themselves. We're going to put it there in the middle. One big kind of hot topic, I don't normally like to talk about politics whatsoever, but this really kind of comes into what we are looking at. So in these countries, healthcare is provided by the government. There are some good things about that, right? So if everybody in the country has healthcare, that could only be a good thing. It doesn't matter if you are able to afford it. It doesn't matter if it just doesn't matter. Like, if you get sick, you get taken care of. So that is a huge advantage. That's a huge awesomeness. I heard a rumor that if you go to Canada and break your arm, you could just go to the hospital and they're not going to charge you, because the government pays for it. So this is like a huge kind of mind-blowing idea for us Americans. The bad thing is that if my mom, she is a health phobia person. So if my mom stubs her toe, she's going to be like, oh my gosh, I got to go to the doctor and get checked out. Like, that's my mom. If she has the sniffle, she's like, oh my gosh, I have to call the doctor and I have to go see the doctor. So imagine, if everybody was able to do that, and, now all of a sudden, if I get really sick, I'm not going to be able to get to see the doctor because, all of people like my mom are taking up all of the appointments. The other thing is there is a person on campus where their sister-in-law had cancer, and it was a very slow cancer. And so the hospital scheduled her surgery 8 months out because, hey, you don't need it right now, so you could wait. And then they were, taking care of the people that were, in their opinion, more pressing. So there's that thing. It's a hot topic today in our politics. There are a group of people who say, yes, everyone should get health care. And then there's another group of people who say, wow, just let them decide their own health care and let the people choose. And, there's lots of words being called. Both sides have pretty good arguments, but it'll be interesting to see with this next election what happens. So that, like I said, hot button. Okay, is there a right or wrong answer? I don't know. You get to decide that. What next? Maybe some of you might vote next election, or maybe not. You might have to wait a little bit longer. Okay, so let's go ahead and we're going to follow the theme. Now we're transitioning and we're going to talk about political systems. Okay, so if we have in China, they have no choices. The government has all of the power. Then that is going to be called a China, North Korea, and this is going to be called a dictatorship, or it's also going to be called an authoritarian. Yeah, I spelled that wrong. And there you go, authoritarian. I'm not saying it right. So like in here, the way I remember is like, this looks like authority. Okay, to me it looks like authority. So they have all of the authority. There is no back talking. There is nothing that you are allowed to say. In China, you are not allowed to talk about murders because that's going to make the country look bad. So there was this reporter who wrote a story, like his friend got murdered in a certain area. And so this reporter, like, hey, there's crime rising in this area. The government needs to step in. And the next day, that person just disappeared. No one knows what happened to him because how dare he say anything negative about the country? They didn't have any freedom of press. They don't have freedom of religion. Like, the dictator decides everything. It's going to decide what clothes are going to be available for you to wear. They're going to talk about what kind of music you're able to listen to, and they're going to tell you where you're allowed to shop. They choose everything for you, and the only choices you get is, do you want that green bell pepper or do you want that smaller green bell pepper? Like, there's very little choices. On the complete opposite, we're going back to the US. We have a lot of say in our government. What's happening next Tuesday? People are going to go vote. So we are a democracy. And we are also a republic. Republic means that your parents, when they vote, they're going probably to like a local library, to a local school. Your parents are not going all the way into DC to vote. So we are going to vote for a senator, or we're going to vote for a representative, and then that person is going to go into DC and vote for us. And if I don't like the way that person votes in DC, well, you know what? I got 2 years, and then I'm going to vote for another person because maybe that person will vote the way I want them to. Okay. The same thing is going to happen with the Electoral College, and this is going to be a really big thing, and we're going to look into it next week. I go and vote, your parents go and vote for who they want to be president. But really what's happening is the Electoral College is going to send someone to go vote for us. So next week we'll talk about, do we still need the Electoral College? Should we get away from the Electoral College? But the idea is that the people have the power. Okay? Everyone says, like, you cannot complain about the president unless you go and vote. I've been hearing that a lot. So this idea that, hey, man, you can't complain about how the system is unless you're, being active. Now, again, we're going to meet in the middle, and then we're going to have like a compromise. Here we have a constitutional monarchy, and usually they have a parliament. So one example of this is the UK. Think of Queen Elizabeth. I just saw over the weekend that she has a person to wear her shoes to break them in, so that by the time the Queen steps into them, they're already comfortable. And I'm like, wow, that's I guess that's the perk to being the Queen. Okay, so when you're here, the people and the government have the power. So you have a queen. The queen is stuck there. You have no say. She's the queen. When the time comes, she's going to die, and then Charles is going to get it. Or if not Charles, then, Prince William. So that's one of the reasons why everyone's so focused on the family, because it doesn't change. It doesn't. But people are able to go and vote, and they're able to vote in Parliament. So I know that there's a difference between Parliament and Congress, but in my brain, I just don't understand it. So to me, Parliament is like Congress, okay? That's where the people are going to have a say in their government and stuff, okay? So that is how all of that's going to kind of look like. That's all I got to say about that. I had a little grab moment. Never mind. So here we have, all of the kind of choices and freedoms that some people have. So here in the US, the people have the vote. So now when we're looking at economics, I have the right to choose whatever I want to wear. On the flip side, dictatorship, they're going to control the whole government. They're also going to control what you're able to wear and have access to. In one particular case, the government of Russia decided that they were going to modernize. This was like 1940s, 1950s. And they are going to make the decision to, everyone is going to grow. Did I say Russia? I said Russia. Everyone's going to grow this particular food, and then everyone else is going to work in the factory. Well, that food that the Russian government chose ended up with a fungus. And so all of the crops in Russia died. Well, if all of the food dies, then what happens to the people? Well, they're going to die too. And so Russia has this like huge amount of people that are going to die because they didn't have the choice. Or at least, that's what I want to say as an American, is that the people didn't have the choice. Maybe if they would have had different crops growing, and if one went, well, maybe they would have had a backup. But, pretty extreme. But maybe I'm just being biased because here in America, we have the choice of what kind of farmer you want to be. I'm probably being biased. Don't be biased like me. Do better. Okay, so looking at cultural diffusion. This one, it gives you the slide of where you're going to look at. The only one that doesn't have a slide at the top is make an argument, but this question directly goes into this question. So just make sure that you are, answering both. And then here is some stuff. Notice how we are jumping from slide 16 to slide 27. Some big ideas here that I just really wanted to touch base with you is to make sure that you understand that cultural convergent is which is the last thing down here. Cultural convergent. Okay, so just like tectonic convergence where they're coming together, the same thing is happening with cultural convergence. We have two cultures that are going to come together and then they're going to kind of mix. If you've ever had Mexican food in Florida, you know that it tastes different from Mexico here in Texas. And that is because in Florida, you have American food mixed with Cuban food. And even though Cubans speak Spanish, they're going to have different seasonings, they're going to use different types of meat, versus here in Texas where it's American food mixing with Mexican food. And so you tend to have, Mexican food that's different in Texas versus in Cuba, because I guess it's not really Mexican. It's probably Cuban. So there you go. A divergent means that they are just separated. So if we are living on a mountain, Spain and France, there's mountains in between. So in Spain, we have a very lots of wines, lots of vineyards for grapes happening in Spain. Very, you take siestas in the early afternoons versus French, who they are going to be lots of bread, like baguettes and croissants and, fancy breads like that. So those mountains kind of separate the two peoples so that they have their own very distinct culture. So answer all of those. We have Zoom on Friday at 10:30 if you need it. So hopefully this helps. Hopefully the video wasn't too long. Bye, guys.